And what's the single inhibitors to actual adoption you found? Or the single greatest inhibitors?
Hello, okay.
I actually don't need this, I'm very clear, but for sake of the remote people, let's use it. Okay, so, depends on where you are. So, in some parts of the globe, you can't actually do anything with IPv6 because you call up all your service providers and they say, we don't have it. No one's asked for it. You're the first one to ask for it. Why do you want it? Oh, you're gonna pay more for it? No, well, I'm not interested, okay? And so there are some parts of the globe that literally it's a problem because the service providers haven't actually incorporated it into their actual offerings. You can't get, ISP internet service with v6 turned on. In places where you can get ISPs and they have support for v6, then the challenge that you have is a little different, which is that when you go and turn on IPv6, it's one of those things that it's not a huge technical challenge because IP version 6 is a little layer. The same protocols, HTTP, SMTP mail, POP3, they all run over IPv6 just like they run over IPv4. So it doesn't change a lot, but a lot of people aren't familiar with it. So there are IT departments who literally are like, we don't test this. I have a website, a little personal website. I went to upgrade it to IPv6 because I finally found a provider that could turn it on. It took me about an hour. I upgraded, it was good, it was done. 6 a.m. the next morning, my website disappeared. It just disappeared. Because I have an accounting job that runs and does logs and tracks IP addresses, and that script was expecting a fixed field of IPv4 numbers, not this huge IPv6 address. And so my website, the code for my website that I wrote, was broken, and it aborted, and the website failed. Your IT department's the same way. Until you tell them, you need to expect someone to connect with IPv6, make sure that the log is correct, make sure that the fields in the database where you store the connection ID is correct. You need to give your IT team time to actually test your public website with v6 before you just turn it on, and that can be a problem. So you get your ISP as a big hurdle, and then you get your internal IT department. Those are usually the two heavy lifting. There is one other one I'll raise, and it's just to go on record. There are DNS service providers who don't support v6. So you do the work, your website works, someone can type in a long IPv6 address and reach you. Now you want to update your .org or your .bz or your .tt, and you want to update it and you want to put a v6 IP address in there. If your service provider doesn't support, your DNS provider doesn't support v6, people won't get your IPv6 address out of your domain name, so it won't work. So that's the last getcha. That's less common. ICANN's been doing some outreach, we've been doing some outreach, but there are still some DNS service providers that aren't 100% there.
I'm seeing one on the left.
Thanks very much, John, for your wonderful contribution. Kevin Swift here from LACNIC. I just had two quick comments, if you don't mind. So early on, Albert would have spoken about how our organizations function. There are bottom-up, open participatory processes. In the LACNIC community, we approach address slightly different from ARIN in that we don't have 0 V4s. We actually do have some V4s, but we are in an interesting policy phase called soft landing, where basically any entity can get about 1,000 V4 addresses once every 6 months. So it's not based on just defined business needs anymore, that's just the policy that we have. But at the same time, for quite a while we have been allocating V6 addresses. And this is regardless of whether you have a plan to use them or not, we do this allocation, it's roughly about 64,000 V6 addresses that any entity can get. And I just wanted to reiterate John's point about education. Education and training is fundamental to make this transition. And this is one of the things that we saw recently in an IPv6 deployment study that we conducted. And within it, the shining example we had was Peru, in which Peru, since 2008, they had their public entities decree V6 as being the standard across all public infrastructure. They started awareness campaigns in collaboration with academia to start telling people about this protocol called IPv6. And then their ISPs actually began deploying this in phases, and they began making investment in training early on, and now they are one of the top IPv6 economies that we see in the world. So those are just my 2 contributions, and thank you.
Hi, morning all. Just 2 quick questions or considerations.
Sure.
Could you touch, Sean Fouché from CARICOM Impacts, could you touch a bit in terms of the security issues related to the switch from V4 to V6, if there are any? And secondly, help businesses, or how would you help businesses justify that expenditure, particularly from the Caribbean region, where obviously the resources are basically more than stretched? How do you then help ICT managers, or whatever the case may be, justify that spend from a business perspective?
We have to comment on both of those. First one is actually a very interesting question, security. So IPv6 is a slightly different protocol than IPv4. It's similar, but different. It has similar security concerns, but different. And so there's an awareness level to run IPv6 securely, much like running v4. IPv6 has some inherent security capabilities that are better than what v4 has, but the counter side of that is IPv6's newer implementations. You're more likely to find a bug that no one else has found because it's only been running 5 years, not running 30 years. So on the balance, there's nothing inherently more or less secure overall, I would say v4 to v6. I guess something to think about. If you don't spend any time working with v6 at all, it is still possible that you are less secure. And the reason's because there is gateway capabilities, automatic tunnels and similar, that equipment possess today. So if you say, I'm not going to turn on v6, I don't want to worry about it, you could still find IPv6 traffic on your network and even escaping through your firewall to the outside world. You can't reduce the amount of effort you have to spend worrying about security by not turning on v6. Even if you don't turn it on, you better go look at what you're doing with IPv6 security, because you don't have to turn it on. Someone can turn it on their laptop, and now how your network responds is how your network responds. So I would say security-wise it's equal, and you pretty much have to make the investment because you can't control what your customers are going to try to run. Let's talk about investment. When you asked, and I wanted to ask the question, you were talking about the average enterprise, or you're talking about a telecommunications provider? Because they're a different formula.
Average enterprise, or let's say from the national entity's perspective.
Okay, so how do you explain to your average enterprise, your average business, why they should put the extra effort, and it is extra effort. You have to actually make sure you've tested with IPv6. You have to make sure that you have connectivity that's IPv6 capable. Why would you put that expense on? And I will make it very simple. People have a reason they want to connect to the internet. Businesses have a business objective that drives them connecting and doing a website. If you're going to spend the money to do the development, to make your system friendly to your customers and business partners, and put it on the internet, go through all the work and the testing and the security, why would you then only put it on part of the internet? Okay? If you're going to go through all the work and you want the maximum return on your very large IT project, it's probably 2% more to future-proof it. If you don't put that 2% in, that's great. But when that's discovered, don't be surprised if they want a new CIO, because that 2% is a very wise investment.
Hi, Jacqueline Morris from TT Mass. I do recall hearing about that LACNIC has some little tool that can help in that process of justifying the expense of going to IPv6. I'm pretty sure that One can tell us more if we have time.
Thanks again. Didn't want to really dominate the mic at this point. Yes, just to add to the information that's out there, there is a financial model that has been developed by LACNIC. And this financial model is really where any ISP, any entity thinking about V6 can actually just change the parameters, plug in the figures, and actually have real cost